Welcome back to another episode of High Ticket Woman. This is Debbie Cottle, and today with me I have Leah Chrest. Leah is the author of two books, one called At the Edge of Jordan, and the other one, It's Okay to Be Okay. She is a blogger, a teacher of Christian meditation, and she uses YouTube as her platform, and she's also a high school math teacher. Welcome to the High Ticket Woman, Leah.
Well, thank
Great to have you here.
Yeah, it's great being here.
Yeah. So, Leah, you when we were connecting with each other, you shared with me that you describe yourself as a strong-willed, accomplished-driven lioness type of a woman. And I thought, you know what? Let's start there because I work with a lot of women who are pretty dominant in their marriages and, often they're married to men who are a little more passive. And I think that there's a lot to be talked about there in terms of like how do you have a healthy God-fearing marriage, right? Which I know is important to you, and yet still have that strong, capable, accomplished, or as you say, strong-willed, those characteristics inside of you. Let's start there.
I love it. Yeah. I think the thing that we have to be most careful of is emasculating our husbands because we are so strong and I mean, come on, let's be honest. We know how to do everything right and everything best.
Do we now?
Or at least we think we do, right? There's this
You do.
illusion that we have it all. And I think that is something to be very mindful of is being aware that that balance in a marriage, and like you just said, sometimes we're married to men who on the front appear more passive, but they are our rock and they're our strength. And it is because of them that gives us that home base, that foundation from which to blossom. And we need to always honor that for sure.
Something tells me, though, that this was a journey for you.
Oh my gosh, yes. I was not very good at that at first. I think, and even Debbie, a week and a half ago, my husband and I had I wouldn't say it was a full on argument, but it was some tension over something. And I was all stirred up for about a day. And then at the end of it, I was praying and I felt the word spoken to me. Could you just accept the possibility you could be wrong? Just be open to that possibility because maybe that's why you're out of your peace. And I thought about, and at first I thought there's no way I'm wrong on this. I'm absolutely right on this. And then the Holy Spirit kind of nudged and said, just can you look again? Just a little bit. Maybe you're not wrong on everything. Maybe you're right on 90%, but even 10%, is there just even a little part here where you could learn something? And I pulled back and oh, and then talk about that next week on this particular podcast. Oh, okay. And because it is a journey. It is absolutely a journey. And um, it is so easy for us to become that powerful force for good, but also we can shove others to the side or devalue their opinions or just become hindrances instead of helps to our partners. And I think that that balance is so important.
Yeah, balance is key. Was there a time I know, this is your second marriage. You are widowed from your f it can you speak to that part of your journey and what you learned
Yes.
through all of that? Because, that's a huge loss.
And the journey was, as you just said, it's went before that.
Yeah.
So my first husband was fairly strong person in some ways. It's actually why I was attracted to him at first, was because he was the first person who I couldn't push around. Because and I wasn't a pushy person as far as I was very polite and respectful and I took care of other people. I was a caretaker, like a mothering person from the beginning. But he was the first person who, if I said something, he wouldn't say, okay, yes, whatever you say. He would push back and say, well, I don't know about that. Or let's talk about that. Or just say flat out no. And that was very attractive to me because I wanted to have that pushback a little bit. I didn't want someone to just agree with me on everything. I wanted some challenge. And, however, there are times that became where I was still too dominant. I mean, things such as loading the dishwasher. I mean, I knew the way to load the dishwasher, and it was not the way he was doing it. And I say this tongue in cheek because I think he actually had a better idea than I did. But I would die on those hills. And it became, anytime when we had our child, our first son, and the child was crying, and instead of giving him a chance to figure it out, just like I had figured it out, how to soothe the child, I rushed in to save, to rescue the child. And so there became this gradual sense of, well, I can't do it like she can. And that was really, really hard for both of us. This journey of him trying to hold his own in the house. And he even told me, he said, at work, I feel confident. At home, I feel like I'm a guest in my own house. Not even a guest, just like I'm just on the side. And that was really, really painful to hear. And I got better at it for sure. Over the years, thank goodness he was strong enough to tell me these things, right? To say, I don't feel like I'm honored here. I get you're a stay at home mom. I get that you do know best in a lot of ways, but can you hear me out? And can I have a say? And thank goodness he was strong enough to tell me those things.
Was there a turning point where you were able to see yourself a little more clearly, or was it just a gradual process?
It was definitely gradual. When I started meditating, so I got to go back and say a little bit more. So there's two sides to the story. That's the me side, and I own it. There was a lot of things there that were not healthy. And I want to say this very clearly to all women listening. We are never the cause of a man's sickness, mental, emotional. We can contribute sometimes. We are never the cause, and we should never carry that. My husband was an alcoholic, and although I think some of my behaviors contributed to making severity a little bit worse, I was not the cause of his alcoholism. He was an alcoholic before I met him, most likely. He worked a very, very demanding job, had to do with law enforcement, so he had a lot of stress at his job. And, so that there was as our marriage progressed, at first it was me being dominant, but eventually when the alcoholism took over, there became this balance of him as a codependent sort of thing, where he would blame me for everything that was going wrong in his life. And although there were some pieces, that yes, I own, there was a lot that was not mine. He was looking outwards for the problems that he was feeling. And so we had that codependency going on where at that point, I actually, because I felt so bad, I gave up my right for a lot of things to the point, and this is boggles my mind that there were some of the things that I agreed to that it just I was giving up my power. Not just no stepping back from the things that, okay, yeah, I shouldn't step on your toes here. And I got better at that, right? But then I was giving in too much. I was going the other direction. So to give you an example,
Did you feel like you were losing yourself in that process?
absolutely. Yes. So at one point I was doing a lot better. I started meditating because I saw that, my depression and struggles I wasn't depressed clinically, but I had symptoms of depression because of the situation I was in at home. And I would cry, and the kids saw it. I had young kids at the time, like 2 and 6, 2 and 5. And, my oldest said, "Mommy, I wish you wouldn't cry so much." And that's when it really hit me that I had to do something, right? And it wasn't about me anymore. I had to be there for my kids. And so I started, meditating and taking that time to listen to God instead of just talking all the time. I started listening, and that's where that transformation started happening, where I was able to see myself clearly, to see where I was overstepping when I shouldn't, and when I was pulling back when I should be stepping forward. And very, very slowly, that renewing of our mind that happens, um, began to take place in me. The thing that really stands out to me, and this is, a couple years before he passed away. Um, he was going to work early in the morning. I was home with the kids, and I would get up in the morning and I would be meditating. I would still stop and say goodbye to him, but he knew that I would meditate like while he was getting ready for work. And he said, I want you to stop meditating in the morning, because it makes me feel bad that I can't be home, and it rubs it in that you are. And that I did change how I meditate. I moved it, I shifted it around. But the reason I was doing that was for our family, right?
Yeah.
And that's my self care. And so I was willing to give up my self care to kind of to his needs. And that's what we don't want to do. So I went from this strong willed lioness to this like kitten, in the course of that. And then I had to come back and find that balance. Like it's not this or this, it's here. Right. To find that is so powerful. And that's that listening to the Holy Spirit and listening to that guidance, and helps you find the best version of you, because that's when that the Holy Spirit's coming through, is when you are at your best. So that's I threw a lot at you there.
No, 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 lots of good stuff there to pull on. Sometimes it's hard to know which direction to go, but, if you're willing to talk about it, ho how did your husband pass?
So the alcoholism caused liver cirrhosis, and he collapsed at work in the spring of, it was about 4 years ago. It says 2021. I believe the spring of 2021, if I'm getting my dates right. And then, he did get sober. So we had 3 months of sobriety, 3 to 4 months before he passed away. But his liver was so spent that it was coming back a little bit, but, you have to have a year of sobriety before you can get a transplant, and he didn't make it to that year. So, um, yeah, it was a complicated, really tough journey, but I'm very grateful because I got to see him sober. And the balance that we were talking about with the marriage, we got to have that last 4 months, because he was in the process of healing, he forgave himself, and we got to have that balance of shared power in the relationship, where we each got to have our needs met, we each had our voice heard, and we got to feel what that was like. And so we did reach that point together, which was wonderful, and the boys, my 2 boys, got to see that in their dad, which I am so grateful for.
Addiction is such, it's like an invisible intruder that's, you know, in the marriage. How much of that do you think was also the cause of you holding back? I guess what I'm asking is, was your husband's addiction affecting the way that he talked to you, and then the way you felt like you had to sort of suppress who you are naturally as a woman?
Absolutely, 100%. Um, and again, I always say this when I talk about addiction, it is a disease, and it is so clear when my husband became sober. I'm not saying it was an overnight, like, light switch or anything, but he was a different man. He went back to his true self. It was the sickness talking, not him. But when the sickness was talking, I was the reason for all of his problems, and I could never do enough, and I wasn't doing anything right, and the whole world was caving in, it was my fault. And I believed it, I internalized that. Um, and that did it turned me into this, like, cowering. And then but there was still those times where I would fight back, right, over the stupid stuff, it doesn't matter, like a dishwasher, because I felt safe to do it. Well, I'm gonna push back a little and in the wrong way, and so I became sick as well. And that's what happens with those sorts of relationships. And the therapist in the hospital said we were codependent, and I about blew my top at her. I was like, "We're not codependent." I didn't even know what that word meant. I looked it up. I said, "We are not." And then I sat with it for a few weeks, and I read everything and I prayed on it, and I said, "Wow, yeah, we are." And then that gave me the tools. So I appreciate her strength in saying what she did and calling us on it, because that gave us the pathway to healing. Once I knew, oh, this is what I'm doing, this is how I'm responding to him, then we could make it right. And I could change that. And looking back, even in those relationships, and if the listeners find themselves in a relationship with addiction, there are ways that we can come from a place of strength. We don't ever need to tell someone what to do. You can't. You can't tell someone to get help. You can't make them. But you can stand in your power and in grace, and you can invite them in. And the most powerful moment I had that was, I don't think ironically, it was probably one of the reasons why, when he collapsed and went to the hospital, it was that morning that he couldn't even get his shoes on because he was so, his stomach was filled with fluid. He was still in denial about everything. And I knelt beside the bed and I said, honey, it doesn't have to be this way. I love you. And a lot of people here are love you and are willing to support you. Whatever you decide is up to you. But I just want you to know that we're here. And it doesn't have to be this way. And that's gentle leadership. It's saying, here's what I'm seeing, and I'm honoring your decision to be wherever you want to be. I'm going to respect your decision. But I'm here and I'm reaching my hand out. Feel free to come here to join me in this place of joy and peace if you choose to. So
Incredibly hard thing to do, though.
it takes a lot of strength. And that's where the Holy Spirit comes in. You have to be grounded in your faith and not your identity as a person, but as a child of God. And to know that you are held and that is where your power and your identity come from. Any place else, it's going to get messed with, but you have to know that securely.
Let's talk about that for a moment because you said you started meditating. And of course, there's I think a societal perspective on meditation, but I think because you say you're a teacher of Christian meditation, you're speaking to a different type of meditation than maybe Eastern, something that's rooted in Eastern religion. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. So, the kind of meditation that I teach and practice is a heart centered meditation where instead of stilling the mind, although that's happens for sure, is that we drop into our heart and we just feel the presence of God because the kingdom is within and we just drop into that kingdom and we just rest there. And I find that when I drop my attention to my heart center, the mind automatically begins to quiet just a little bit because it's no longer the focus. And get some pushback sometimes, and I'm not the only practitioner of Christian meditation. It is very widespread at this point, and it is a part of our tradition as Christians. Even Jesus himself, when you think about him going away in the mornings to pray, I don't imagine him dropping to his knees and endlessly spewing words. I don't think he was on his knees for 2 hours talking. I think there was some time of just listening, being with his Father. And that's what meditation is, just the other side of that conversation where we're just listening, where we're just resting in God's presence.
The word meditate really just means to think on. So, I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is to put yourself in a place where you are thinking on and being in the presence of God. Give me thinking on Him and thinking on His Word. Yeah.
And even just
So,
listening, just listen in your heart.
just listening. Interesting. So, grief has a way of changing us.
Yes.
I mean, that's just how it works. How did the grief, the loss of your husband affect you as a woman, affect your kids? And how does it play out in your marriage now because you are remarried?
Yeah. Wow. That's 3 questions in one. I've got to handle them one at a time. Um, so for myself, I think it was the realization of just, we talked about already the idea of our identity in God is all that matters. And my greatest fear throughout my adulthood was losing my husband. That was before he was ever sick, before I knew about the alcoholism. I just, I had so much of my identity wrapped up in him early on in our marriage because I was a young woman. And a lot of women do this. Our identity is in our partner. And I was definitely the epitome of that. And so gradually, through the meditative process, through prayer, through just maturing, I learned that that's not the case. And I found my identity in me and in God. However, losing him was, I had to, it was a full break. I had to say, okay, that's not who I am. Who am I outside of that? And then the other catalyst to this was a lot of friends and family would say to me in the days, weeks after his passing, this is going to be the hardest year of your life. You're just going to have to survive. And that was just not acceptable to me. There's a lioness coming out. I'm like, I'm just not going to survive. I'm going to thrive. I'm going to, darn it, I'm coming out fighting. Like, this is coming out. And so I leaned hard into prayer and I said, God, you have me. Like as Paul says, sometimes it's better to be single than be married because of what you can do for God. And I said, hey, look, you've got a lot more of me now. Yes, I have my children to take care of, but I don't have a husband who was very sick for a couple of years. I was doing a lot of care for him and the whole household and a bunch of other things. I don't have anyone's demands to meet with, to balance, to I don't have to run anything by anybody. It's just me. Me and you, God, what do you want from me? And leaning hard into that prayer life, that dependence on God, absolutely changed me. So that's how I changed, was that complete reliance on God and doing his will. So instead of God and husband, it's kind of like this, it became God first and honor the husband as a way of honoring God became in the second marriage. The children, that was a journey, and that could be a completely other podcast of how to mother children through grief. But the best I can say of anyone in that situation is to listen. Just spend a lot of time listening and holding them. We don't have to make things better right away. They're going to be angry sometimes or sad sometimes, or they might not be any of that. They might just act okay, and that's okay. I mean, my oldest, I swore was going to hit a bottom at some point because he just kept going like nothing was wrong. And it's been 4 years, and I've seen him. He did deal with it, but he dealt with it on a very different level than my youngest did. And he still grieved, but in his own way. It wasn't the way that was obvious. And just being okay with that too, just opening up, "Hey, buddy, can do you wanna talk about anything? How are you feeling about this? I'm here." And just being there and just being with what is with the children and not trying to force or change anything, just accepting is huge, with the parenting.
The word that keeps jumping out of my mind is patience. Patience with yourself, patience with you, the process of grief. I'm curious, were your friends right? Was that first year really difficult for you, or did you completely make it your own? And yeah, and how did you make it your own?
It definitely was not the hardest year of my life. There were some the very first couple days were the hardest days of my life, for sure. I mean, that was painful. However, as soon as I kind of surrendered it and got past the trauma, because trauma is hard, and there was some trauma with the passing that, I had to work through. But after I got through that and was willing to look at it as an opportunity, this is an opportunity. My husband, I deep faith, I know he's okay. And I had that connection with him still, I would guess, spiritual connection. So I knew he was okay, and I knew we still had that connection. So I didn't have to worry about that. And I missed him, his physical presence, but I still felt connected to him. I didn't feel like I lost him entirely. Um, and then just leaning into serving and giving and being a mom. And I don't know, I think this spiritual transformation, I got a taste of that peace that passes understanding that we're promised in the Bible. And so in some ways, it was one of the best years of my life, which
Mm.
was shocking to me. I went from like, I'm just gonna have to survive to whoa. And I think one of the most powerful things that happened was my coworkers and my students. They knew I was a joyful person, but they didn't know all that was going on at home. No one knew he was an alcoholic except for me and my parents, not even his parents. At least he didn't tell them. They may have figured it out, but it wasn't spoken to them. His friends didn't know. No one knew but me and my parents. And my parents knew because they caught him with something and found out through the back door. And so no one knew. So they saw this joyful person walking through the doors of the school, always a smile on my face, and they're thinking, "Oh, it's situational. This is what's going on." There's no She says all these things about her faith, but is it really true? And then when everything went down and I was still that way, of course I had moments where I would cry, and I allowed those emotions, like you said, patience. I allowed that to flow through me. I didn't fight it. I just cried. If I needed to cry, I just cried. If I was at school And I was in front of my students and I needed a minute and the tears rolled. That's okay. I just accepted that and embraced that. And my coworkers and my students, they started realizing, oh my gosh, this is something deeper and I want what she has. And it became a powerful ministry where people would come to me with, hey, I lost so and so. Can we talk? Or what are you doing? What is working for you that's giving you this? Because I've never seen this before. And so it was a powerful year of ministry, where I really got to be there for people, and the Holy Spirit used me to be a witness to others. And I think that is what made it one of the best years of my life so far. But that peace continues, that joy continues. I've just gotten better from there. So,
That's an amazing story because so much of the time we fight our struggles, we don't surrender to them. Did you did you always know through that journey that you wanted to remarry?
this is funny, actually. So, yes, I knew I wanted to. However, I made a promise to my children that it would be just the three of us until my youngest started high school. And I said the only thing that would change that is if I was told directly by God that I was to remarry. Had to be something very clear, like just knock your socks off kind of thing that then then I would get remarried. Well, clearly something happened, right? He's got remarried.
Clearly, because 'cause you're married.
Yeah, my youngest is entering 6th grade, so I started dating about 4 or 5 years before I said I would. But so I was, yes, eventually, but I was content to be single. Um, and I had
You have to tell us what knocked your socks off.
this is a crazy story. So this is about a year after my husband passed. I had a very vivid dream, and it's all dreams are, right? There's just weird things in the dream. I'm in a golf course at high school graduation with my in-laws. Like, it's just weird, right? There's all these weird combinations. And someone asked me where my boyfriend is in the dream. And of course, I come back in my typical lioness style. I don't have time for a boyfriend. I'm a single mom with 2 kids. I don't have time to date. What are you talking about? And then I kid you not, this is like the Monty Python, if you've ever seen that movie. The voice of God comes over top and says, "You will date, and you're going to date," and gave me the time that following summer, so like 10 months out, said, "You're going to date. This is the time." Told me a couple details, which I'll keep to myself, and then told me one more thing and said, "You will have a daughter with a middle name of," and said the middle name of my current mother-in-law. Okay, which, so and I woke up just like, "What just happened? And is this real?" So I wrote it down really quick and I just kinda shelved it because they said the following summer, and this was now September around then, so I had 9 months, and, that close to that summer, I did meet someone and, we started dating because he met the other criteria, yeah, we talked about from the dream, and I told the kids as soon as the dream happened, I said, "This is what happened. If I meet blank, 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 are you willing to accept that I'll date?" And they said, "Yes, we agree." I said, "Okay, well, what happened, right?" And I'm dating, and we're talking, and he asked me, "Hey, what are your kids' middle names?" At this point, I'd forgotten about that 3rd part, and he shares his daughter's middle name, and it's that name. And I said, "Okay, you can buy the ring now, like, we're good." I didn't say that, that's what I was thinking in my head is, "Oh my goodness." So, yeah, we're married, and even that first I still fought back initially, and we talked about that strong woman thing and that balance, and one of the first things I said to him one of our first dates was, "Listen, this is who I am, and I need you to be strong in who you are. Like, I do not want to repeat the past. I want you to know your strength and to honor mine and me honor yours. Like, that is so important to me that you don't need me for your happiness and I don't need you for mine. That we are strong in our faith and we serve side by side, hand in hand together. If you're up for that kind of relationship, I'm in." And he showed me 100% that he was, and it's been a beautiful journey.
I remember having to say or not having to say, but saying to my husband, Jeff, before we married, "I need a man who will push back."
Yes.
And maybe you could speak to that because I think there's so many women out there who say they want that, but then they don't really accept it.
So I think pushback, what kind of pushback is it? I think that's very important because I was seeking when I was younger a pushback that was not truly honoring, and
What do
honoring
you mean when you say that, not honoring?
someone telling you you're wrong is not honoring you, right?
Oh, I see it. Just, like, constantly contradicting you or
Or yeah, and he didn't do that at first, but there was that chance and that's where it ended up being was more of that. But someone who's respectfully pushed back can say, I see where you're coming from, but this is where I'm coming from. And like, so for instance, a good example of that is, this makes it a lot easier. I don't know how we would navigate having a mutual child. He has two of his own. I have two of my own, right? We have slightly different parenting strategies, and we've both been more or less single parents for about 10 years average between us when we met. And so we both kind of had some things set and some traditions and things with our children. And so when we honor each other but push back, it looks like something will happen. I'll make a decision with one of my biological children, and he'll pull me aside later, not in front of the kids, and say, Hey, Leah, this is what I noticed. Is that really the best thing for him? This is what I see. Maybe you could rethink that. However, because it's my biological child, he gives me the final word. So if I pray on it and I'm still feeling like, no, I don't think this is the best for him, he still honors that. And the same with his. If I'm seeing something going on, I'll say to him, this is what I'm seeing. Maybe this strategy might work better with this from my experience. But again, if he chooses that that's not right for him with his children, he gets the final say. Um, and so that is that honor, that's that pushback of I see this and I'm gonna give you something to think about here, but I'm gonna honor whichever way you go. And then every other area of our lives, the same thing applies. Some of it's work, whether it's church or service. This is what I see. This is what I'm noticing. Pray on it. Let's talk about it. It's not you're wrong. It's not fix it. It's just a conversation and an honoring. And that's super important to have that.
well, would you say your the 2 families are blending together at this point?
It's going really, really well. Well, right now, Debbie, there are 4 children in my house and you can't hear them, which is a miracle. Uh, and my husband is at work right now, but I'm a teacher, so I'm home, and so I have the kids. And it's definitely a journey. And again, that patience and that listening, there were and still are occasionally some strong emotions about these things, about all of a sudden, here we are with 3 and now we're 6, and now we have to share space, and we have to share schedules, and, my stepchildren are only here, I would say 1/3 of the time over the course of a year, so we have a lot of time that is just 4 of us, but then we have to make that happen, and it's just that listening that, early on, there was some words said by 3 of the 4 children. The youngest was pretty chill about it, but the 3 of the 4, the older ones, they said some things that I will not repeat because I don't want it coming back to them when they're adults, some of the things they said about each other. But it was rough, it was really rough, and it was just having that strength, and again, identity in God, knowing your help, to sit there and take it, to hear all the things being said, not to the other children, but to you about them, and to hear and to say, "Okay, I see where you're coming from. I hear you, I love you. I'm willing to listen, and can we just be open to the possibility that opinions can shift?" And I'll give examples of things like, remember when this happened? Maybe it's you used to not like coconut and now you do. Your opinion shifted on that. And maybe it could happen with this too. And it's funny because, a couple years in, a year and a half to 2 years in of blending, and it's about a year and a half. There was something, especially my oldest, I'll say, "Remember when you said that to me?" And he looks at me in disbelief and says, "I said that? I believe that?" I said, "Yeah, you did." He said, "Wow." Because it does, it transforms. And when you give them the acceptance, that space to say, "Okay, I see where you're coming from, and I'm gonna hold that for you. And then I'm gonna crack the door and let the light in and say, this is a possibility too. So I'm not holding you where you are. I'm seeing you where you are. It's okay to be here, but there's another path too. And can we just be open to that and then let
Your
things up?"
your example obviously has been very powerful for your family. Are you teaching the kids to meditate?
In their own way. I've taught them breathing. I've taught them I've done meditation with each of the children over the years, and they each have their own way and their own faith. My 2 particularly have been in the journey with me, the longest. My stepchildren are just little bits here and there that they're starting to get introduced to because they've known me, for a little less time, but, for sure, again, it's that acceptance of where they are and knowing everyone's a little different, but they both know how to listen, how to pray, and, there's a beautiful story with my oldest recently that he had a big decision to make, and I won't share the specifics since it's his life and he's
Sure,
working now,
sure.
but he was praying over that decision, and he had a dream of his own where one option played out, and he felt his dad's presence in the dream, and he woke up and he said, "Mom, I think I know what to do." And it was just really cool that he knew to, like, take it to prayer and to listen and to wait for the signs and the things that and sometimes it's those silent nudges. It may not be profound like a dream. God does work in dreams, see that in the Bible all over the place. But that's not the only way. It can be advice from a friend. It can be something in nature. It can be in the Bible. You opened up to a page and that verse just comes at you. It could be a podcast listening today, right? There's so many ways that God talks to us. And both of the boys have found their own way to listen. If it's not in meditation, it's other ways where they say, "Okay, I'm got my ear to the ground. What's the next step?" And they listen.
And as you say, the key is waiting for the answer, which isn't always easy, but you've obviously you through your own journey and through all the things that you've gone through, you've obviously really learned to lean on God, surrender to Him, and wait patiently for Him to speak to you. This has been an amazing story, Leah. Thank you so much for sharing it. If
Absolutely.
if you were to sort of synthesize through everything that you've gone through and give one last nugget of wisdom to women out there, what would it be?
That what you imagine for yourself is nowhere near what God has for you. I think so often we put ourselves in boxes with what we think we can do or what we think God's asking us to do, or we blow it up to this proportion of if I surrender my life to God, God is going to ask me to fill in box of greatest fear. Okay. And sometimes my greatest fear is losing my husband, and it happens. So I will say that can happen. However, that was also one of the greatest gifts in my life. And looking back on it, it was having to meet that fear that opened that up to freedom. So realizing that surrender is the best choice you can make. It's going to bring you the greatest peace, the greatest joy, that open the doors for you. And that what you can imagine for yourself is nowhere near what God can imagine for you. I told my 14-year-old recently that when I was his age, when I imagined my life and then I look at where I am now, that they just don't even compare. And it's not that, oh, I had all these great dreams, they never happened. It was, oh, I dreamed here and God took me here. And I can only imagine what might be in the future if I continue. And for the listener, whatever they are hoping for, lay it down and just let your mind be blown and just be there along for the ride.
I love that. Let your mind be blown and lay it down and go. Yeah, that's amazing. Leah, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your story with us.
And thank you for the opportunity. It was such a blessing to speak with you today.
Yeah, thank you. And everybody, thanks for spending time here today with both Leah and I. If today's episode stirred something in you, don't ignore it. Remember, healing takes intention and you don't have to do it alone. So, Leah, what's the best way for people to reach out to you if they want to work with you?
Absolutely. I would recommend my website is probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. It's thecontemplativechristian.com. And on that, you can obviously access my blog and comment there, and I can reach out to you through there. I have my YouTube channel linked in my blog. I have both books linked in my blog, as well as my Substack, Instagram, and Twitter. So it's a one-stop shop, thecontemplativechristian.com, and you can go wherever you want from there.
So, we'll make sure to put that in the show notes for today. Everybody, that's it for today. Don't forget to subscribe and share this with a friend. So until next time, please keep showing up, keep staying curious, and remember, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be teachable.